Good morning. The first question I have for you is, who do you think is Michael Santiago and who do you think is George DeAngelis? I'm George? All right, very good. So that makes you?
George.
That's George. I'm Michael. Okay? And today we're going to talk a little bit about police officers and our heroes. There are lots and lots of videos you can watch, lots of news feeds that you can watch to talk about how bad police officers are. Would you agree with that? Okay. What we don't see a lot of is all the good things that police officers do. And that's what my presentation is about today. You're going to see some YouTube videos. We're going to talk a little bit about the Dallas Police Department. We're going to talk about our own experiences. George, like he said, was a dog handler, so we're going to talk a little bit about canine and how important they are to the police force. And so the first thing we're going to do, if you would, George.
With a story about a simple act of kindness that might have gone unnoticed had it not been for what happened immediately afterwards. It involves a San Diego police officer, a Marine combat veteran who had done several tours of duty overseas. As it turned out, it was far more dangerous to be back at home. But nobody knew that when the officer met a young man at a local McDonald's. That's where our own Lee Cowan picks up this story.
Rarely do surveillance cameras capture the good in people. But on this day, at this San Diego McDonald's, for that police officer, they caught a life's fine, decent act. Just after leaving that McDonald's, Officer Jeremy Henwood was gunned down just proceeding his patrol car. A crime made even more incomprehensible by the fact he had just returned from Afghanistan and served 2 tours in Iraq as a U.S. Marine.
I think it goes without saying that Jeremy was a great man and a hero to our country.
Thousands turned out for his memorial service. Of his bravery and chivalry. He ever did that summed up the way he lived.
3 minutes before he was killed, he's buying lunch for some little kid he didn't even know.
That little kid was 13-year-old Davian Tinsley, standing behind Officer Henwood in line at that McDonald's, short by comparison, and also a little short on change.
I asked him for 10 cents, and he said, "What's 10 cents for?" And I said, 3 cookies. And he said, "Well, I could buy the 3 cookies for you."
He opened his wallet and his heart to a kid he'd never met.
He said, "What do you want to be doing when you grow up?" I said, "NBA star." And he said, "Well, you got to work hard for that." Thank you.
With that, Officer Henwood walked out. It was the last conversation he ever had. That brief encounter has changed the way Davian now looks at life.
Somebody I met that was a good guy, and then 2 seconds later he died. It was just crazy.
Without knowing it, Officer Henwood had taught a sobering lesson to a boy and the rest of us. Kindness can go a long way, but life isn't always fair. Lee Cowan, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Okay. I've spent part of my career as a police officer, as did George, working internal affairs. How many of you here have ever heard of internal affairs? What is internal affairs? Okay. What we did, or what I did, was I investigated misconduct by police officers within the police department. How many of you police officers going bad, doing bad things? A lot of you. How many of you heard this story right here? Okay, a few of you, but not all of you. Very seldom do you see these kinds of things occurring where when a police officer does something good, you hear about it. We often get news people talking about it. At the same time, sometimes we get letters. People send letters to police departments letting them know, hey, this officer did this for me. These things we don't hear about. Why do we hear about bad things about police officers? Can you tell me why?
Bad news sells.
What?
Bad news sells.
Absolutely. Bad news sells. And that's why you see these kinds of things in the news. Good news doesn't sell, does it? It does not. This next picture I'm going to show you, what do you think is going on here? You see a police officer and a homeless person. What do you think? He's what? How's he helping him? Well, let's let the officer tell us.
Very cold night that night. I was assigned to West 44th Street and Broadway, and I was on the football stand, and I myself that night had about 2 pairs of socks on, winter socks, and also my combat boots, and my feet were still freezing. So basically, I was standing there and I heard somebody laughing and joking around, and I looked over and somebody was laughing, this elderly gentleman who had no socks, no shoes on or anything. And I went up to him and I was like, where are your shoes? He's like, "Hey, officer," he's like, "I've never had a pair of shoes." He's like, "But God bless you, thank you for doing what you're doing." And that really, it taken me back because, this gentleman had enough heart to say, "God bless me," but he didn't have a pair of socks on. And I can't imagine how cold that feeling was. And so I ran a little bit ahead of him because he was headed south on 7th Avenue. And I knew the area, there was a shoe store. So I ran into the shoe store and I had explained to them there was an elderly gentleman with no socks on, no shoes on. And I said, "Listen, I'd like to buy a pair of boots, something that's going to last a while. I don't care what the price is. We got to do this as an elderly gentleman out there with no socks." And Skechers helped me out, so while they were waiting to find out what pair they had, I ran outside and grabbed the elderly gentleman. And I said, "Listen, I got a surprise for you." So I brought him to the Skechers. I sat him down, asked him what shoe size he was. And he said it was a size 12, so I ran back in there. And I said, "Listen, you got to give me a size 12, and they came. And I paid, and I brought the shoes and the socks out, and I knelt down, and that's when Jennifer had taken a picture. But to my surprise, I didn't see anybody there at that time. I didn't even know somebody had taken a picture. And so I was just doing my job. I just knelt down, put the socks on, the shoes on, lifted them back up, and I said, "Listen, sir," I was like, "You want to grab a cup of coffee? Maybe we'll get something to eat." And he goes, "No, officer." He goes, he's like, "No, officer." He's like, "Listen, you've done enough." He said, "God bless you and be safe." He's like, "I love the police." And that, again, it's just, when I brought out the shoes, it was just smile ear to ear. It was absolutely amazing. And I was able to share that moment with him, and he just continued to walk on his way. He didn't ask for anything. And it was a great moment for both of us.
All right. This officer saw this homeless person, no shoes, so he bought him a pair of boots. And he paid $100 for those boots, and he bought him some socks. And what's interesting to me, not only did he buy him the boots and the socks, but what did he do? He put them on for him. He put them on. And this man was very, very thankful for that. And that's an act of kindness that we don't know about in terms of police officers, do we? Okay. We're going to talk just a second about the Dallas police. It says that the Dallas police has over 3,500 sworn officers and about 556 civilians who make up the department. Of those 3,500 employees, only 1,800 of them are in patrol. Now that may not seem like a lot. It may seem like a lot to you, but here's something even more interesting. As of last night, the Dallas Police Department has answered 2 million calls for service. As of last night. You know what that means? That means that the police department gets calls for help. And as of last night, 2 million citizens have called for help for the police department. Police officers. That should impress you. Right? Does it? Say yes. Yes. Thank you. Because it impresses me. Okay? It says that these 2 million calls were handled by 1,800 police officers. 8,377 calls were Part 1 crimes or crimes against persons. Does anybody know what a crime against a person is? Yes, ma'am.
It's against anybody, any.
I'm sorry?
It's a crime against society.
Yes, it's a crime against society. But let's be more specific. A crime against a person are specific types of crimes. There's 4 major crimes against persons. Murder, assault, what?
Domestic abuse?
No. Robbery. Did we say assault? We said assault, right? So it's murder, robbery, assault, and... No? You guys like these domestics, don't you? Huh? Bargaining? No. Let me tell you what it is. It's rape. You forgot that one. By the way, how many of you know that you cannot be raped in Texas? Oh, yeah. How many of you know you cannot be raped in Texas? Raise your hand. Only 2 of you should know that because you're in my class. Why can't you be raped in Texas? Because it's a law? No, you can't be charged with rape in Texas. Cannot. And let me tell you why, because I know you're all wondering now. Texas changed the law from rape to sexual assault because rape is a gender-specific law, and there are assaults going on that involve more than just women. Men are also being sexually assaulted. But by the definition, we couldn't charge them because men are not women. And that may be a surprise to you. Okay? So they changed it from rape to sexual assault. So in Texas, there's no such thing as rape. It's sexual assault. Because now we've made it gender neutral. Everybody with me with that? Okay? Good. So, what are crimes against property?
Vandalism?
Okay, vandalism is crimes against property, but it's not as serious. Give me a serious one.
When somebody breaks into a home, that's
Okay, somebody breaks into a home. That's called a what?
Burglary.
Burglary. What's another one?
Arson.
trespassing.
Who said arson?
Arson.
Arson is another. What'd you say? Criminal trespass is not one of those. It's a lesser offense. We have theft. And then motor vehicle theft. So what are they? Burglary, theft, automobile theft, and arson. Those are the 4. And that's what they handle. That's what these calls are all about. Crimes against persons. The other calls are like criminal mischief, assaults, minor calls like that. All right? So they handle those also.
To help break up a fight, but an officer turned that incident into an act of kindness at his own expense. Action 7 reporter Ana Velasquez has the story.
It started as a call to a family fight in southeast Albuquerque.
Grandma had called regarding her grandchildren.
Officer Hector Marquez Jr. says 6 grandchildren, all being raised by Grandma, a woman in her 60s. And once things calmed down, he started asking questions.
Mom's kind of out of the picture, so it's just Grandma on her own.
He says that's because the kid's mother is in and out of jail. Then the story got worse. He learned Grandma is the main provider and she's on a fixed income.
I don't know how we got onto the topic about the welfare of the kids and if she needed anything. She had told me something about that they had last eaten in the morning. Grandma had made pancakes, but she couldn't get her food stamps until the 19th, which was 8 days away.
It was dinner time, so Officer Marquez used his own money and made a quick trip to the grocery store.
He got the milk, bread, eggs, sandwich meat, and snacks for the kids. Just his way, he says, of looking out for them and Grandma.
Poverty is just kind of part of the social reality, and it's something we have to deal with. Of course, we want to help out as much as we can, but we only have the means that we possibly can do.
Officer Marquez tried to do this act of kindness quietly, but one of his fellow officers told his boss, and in turn, the department publicly honored him. In southeast Albuquerque, Ana Velasquez, KOET Act.
Okay. So I'm going to let George take this next one because this is a really, really interesting story.
Yes, thank you. This case was really touching. Caught my attention because I still stay in touch with what's going on in New York. It's my home state. And this case involves the detectives from the Bronx, from New York. And this gentleman right here is a retired New York homicide detective. And he was one of the detectives that investigated a death of a 5-year-old baby. The case became known in New York as the Baby Hope case. This 5-year-old was found bound and gagged with a plastic bag over her head in an abandoned apartment. And nobody claimed the body. And this case went unsolved for 22 years. And the fact that nobody came and claimed the body touched the whole detective squad. And so they all funeral. They paid for the funeral plot. They paid for the dress that this little girl was buried in. And they went and visited her grave every month so that she wouldn't be alone. And what they did is they put Baby Hope on her headstone, and they also put a phone number where anyone could go who visited her grave, a tip line to please call so that they could get this poor little girl identified. And so he retired, and he still went every day to visit this little girl. Well, he retired. The case was then given to the next squad, the next generation of detectives. And the case never, ever went cold. They continued to work it. And, you know, God has a way of seeing justice. 22 years later, this lady is in a laundromat. And she overhears two ladies talking about how they and their third sister went out with a man, and two of them returned, and the third sister did not. And this lady overhears this, and she gets very suspicious. And she says, that's terrible. Three sisters leave, two come back, and the third one didn't. So thank God this lady had a conscience and a civic duty, and she goes to the detectives. And she knew these girls. She knew these ladies. So she tells them, hey, I overheard this conversation at the laundromat. I know these ladies, and they were really remorseful about an incident that happened when they were little, that their little sister never came back, and they were still troubled by it. So the detective said, do you know her name? They get it. They go, and they locate these two ladies, and they tell them the same story, and so they're able to track down the mother. And once they get the mother, they get DNA from her. And they match the DNA to the DNA that they were able to get from this little girl. Now, remind you, this is 1991. There is DNA technology at that time. In fact, some of you may not even been born yet when this happened. Well, they were able to get DNA, luckily, from the mother's side, and they were able to identify this baby. And once they were able to identify the baby, they got a name, and do you know what her name turned out to be? Angelica. How ironic is her name? You know, angel, Angelica. Her name is Angelica Castillo. This case just broke 2 weeks ago in New York. Angelica Castillo. From there, they were able to backtrack her activities, and she was last seen with her uncle. They went ahead, interviewed the uncle, brought him back, and he confessed to killing Angelica. And he is now arrested and charged with her murder. And so now what the detectives have done is that they took up a collection, and they actually went back and have put her name on the headstone. What fascinating thing that they did is that they would go from time to time and do a surveillance on her headstone and see who was visiting, if anyone was visiting her headstone. And then they would also see if anyone was leaving any cards or anything. And there were from time to time they would find sympathy cards, and then they would take those cards and print them for fingerprints to see if it would lead to a suspect. But they were never successful in finding any fingerprints, which I thought was pretty imaginative on their part. But they put in over 22 years of work, and they never gave up, and they were able to find out who that killer was. And finally, this detective finally had come to peace and terms with it. But I thought that was pretty impressive that for 22 years that detective squad never gave up and were able to find the killer. Thank God that that lady came forward with that information. So again, this type of dedication and devotion, you don't hear about it, but you do hear a lot about, you know, the improprieties of the New York Police Department and things of that, but you don't hear this kind of devotion and dedication. So, and like I said, this case just broke 2 weeks ago. And you can still see it on YouTube. You can hear all the details on it. Okay.
Finally, what would you do if you had no money to buy food for your family?
A broke single mother of 3 in Florida felt she had no choice but to steal food from a supermarket. As Jessica Robles was leaving with a cart full of unpaid-for groceries, Officer Vicki Thomas arrived on the scene. What Officer Thomas did next surprised everyone.
I made the decision to buy her some groceries because arresting her wasn't going to solve the problem with her children being hungry. To see them go through the bags when we brought them in, and it was like Christmas.
All I wanted to tell her is thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, wow.
Jessica is now going to a local food bank while looking for work. She says when she gets back on her feet, she will bless others the way Officer Vicki Thomas blessed her. Wow.
This officer arrives at the grocery store. This woman actually tried to leave the grocery store with $300 worth of groceries. She loaded up her cart and she just walked right out, thinking that she was not going to get caught. This officer arrives, realizes that she is in dire straits. She helps her with the groceries. Now, they did give her a ticket for theft, because if you do something wrong, you have to face the consequences. However, she helped her, and since this video came out, she has found a job, and she's taking care of her kids, and she's able to buy her own food, which I thought was very good. Any comments or questions so far? No? This officer probably violated police policy, because you're not supposed to pick up people off the street and give them a ride home, because most officers will say, we're not a taxi service. But this police officer decided that in the middle of this rain, he was going to do something to help this person. I thought that was pretty interesting also.
When you get pulled over by police and maybe you've done something wrong, you'd expect to get a ticket, not what one driver in Collin County received.
CBS 11's JD Miles is live at Plano PD headquarters with a traffic stop unlike any you may have heard before. JD?
Karen, no one here can recall a story like the one we're about to tell you. It involves a Plano police officer, a down-on-his-luck man, and a $100 bill. Hayden Carlo has been struggling to support his wife and 2 children.
You get paid, pay your bills, there's your money, it's gone.
It didn't help when the wily man was recently pulled over by Plano police for an expired registration sticker.
Now I said there's no explanation for why I haven't done it except for that I don't have the money. I said it was either feed my kids or get this registration done.
The officer wrote a citation and handed it to the 25-year-old.
Opened it up, and there's a $100 bill. I was like, I broke down in my car, what else do you do?
The officer never told anyone about the $100 gift, but Carlo's grandfather was so moved by the kind gesture, he wrote a letter to the department.
I get emotional when we talk about this type of thing. You just don't find many officers do the type thing.
The officer doesn't want to be identified, but his co-workers plan to honor him anyway.
He basically told me he felt that this young man needed it more than him, and it was just the right thing to do.
Carlo was able to update not only the registration on his car with the money, but also his wife's. Now driving to a new job and providing for his growing family after a gift from the last person in the world he expected one from during tough times.
He helped me out when I needed it, and I appreciate that. I'll never forget that, man. It definitely restored my faith in God.
Now, other officers around the country we've seen have recently been recognized for similar acts. This one deserves as much attention as any of them, but the officer behind it wants to remain anonymous.
What do you think of that? How many of you here have gotten tickets before? You can all raise your hands. Wouldn't it be nice if you'd have had a $100 bill attached to that? So now, next time you get stopped by a police officer, remind them of the Collin County Sheriff. Put a $100 bill in the ticket. And that way, you can make some money. It was a great act of kindness on the officer's part. Okay. Here's the part that is the saddest of all, and that is officers killed in line of duty.
Cops put their lives on the line every day, even during routine traffic stops, because you never know what's going on with the person that is being pulled over. Joining me, retired detective Steve Rogers. You were a cop. Would you agree this driver probably panicked when he saw the flashing red light, because cops say his trunk was full of guns and drugs? He didn't know why the cops were pulling him over.
Jane, what a chilling video. I could tell you that we learned in the police academy that no traffic stop is routine. You never know who's going to get out of that car. But I'll tell you what kind of boils my blood, and I'm sure you'll touch upon this later. I understand this guy had a criminal record, and that's part of the problem we have in police work. A lot of these guys have violent backgrounds, and these judges let them free. And look, we almost lost the life of a hero cop. Thank God we didn't.
Well, let me go over his charges. In 2010, he served 3 months in jail on a drug charge. He was arrested in 2004 for assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest. So I got to go back to you, Steve. As a former police officer, let's assume that for a second, if the cop had flagged him over and he had stopped, would you have run a background check, or would you just have given him a ticket for a broken taillight and let him go on his merry way? Was he panicking for a reason, or was it irrational panic?
Oh, he panicked because he had that arsenal and drugs in his car. And yes, we would actually call for a backup unit. We would do a background check. Had he stayed calm, the officer would have probably never searched that trunk. It was a traffic violation, but he...
I'm going to talk a little bit about officers that have been killed in line of duty. In 2012, there were 85 line of duty deaths by police officers. Go ahead. Texas, California, New York, and Florida lead the nation consistently in the number of officers killed. And in the last, well, I'm going to let you watch this. Go ahead.
This video is a police shootout. Oregon State Trooper pulled a man over on August 29th. 2013, the man pulls out a gun and starts shooting at the police officer. Sometimes I'll post videos in regards to bad police officers, and that's of course with intentions to weed out the bad ones, but there are many, many good police officers that risk their lives daily to protect and serve us. And this is an example right here. So I'm going to show you this video. It's very dramatic.
Please sit back in the car for me. You're speeding, all right? Now I need you. Sir, get back in the car for me now. Sir, please get back in the car for me now. I told you you were speeding.
Also want to note this man had kids in his car when he did that. But the police officer did what he had to do. Good job, police.
It says Texas has led the nation in the past 5 years in number of officers killed. We average 12 officers killed every year. Now, there's a test coming right now. You ready? You guys ready? All right, this is going to take your powers of observation to see if you can pass this test. Who is that?
That's you.
God dang it, it's not me. Who is it? Is it Michael or is it George? It's George. Now, you may not recognize him in this picture because he's got a mustache. Right, George?
That's right.
You have a mustache? That's right. This is George in 1913. Actually, it was
2 years ago.
I'm going to turn this over to George. He is now going to talk about canines because he handled canines. Now, I will tell you this. I am a pet lover. I have 3 dogs, and if you're a pet lover, this is going to touch your heart. Just bear with him. Okay? All right.
Okay.
Good old George.
I was fortunate enough to work canine in my department. We had a canine unit that at the time when I was there had 12 dogs. And I tell you what, if you love working with dogs and you aspire to get into law enforcement, that's the best combination. That is the best assignment you could ever have. That was in God, this dates myself.
85.
I wish it was. That was 1979, believe it or not. That was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we were there.
Just by show of hands,
Oh.
how many of you were around?
Nobody in this room. Nobody.
Porter, I know you were. Okay. Oh, you're so happy about that. And the rest of you were not. All right.
And my dog's name was Stomper. And that was a name, at that time, our department was taking donation dogs. And most departments now import dogs from Germany and they pay quite a fee. He was a free dog. I mean, I say free. He was a dog that was on death row at the local pound. He was going to be put to death because he had bit the next door neighbor. And the guy there at the city pound said, "Hey, I understand you guys are looking for a dog, the canine unit." We go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, we got a guy here that, I think he'd be good for you guys. He bites." Well, that's not the reputation you want, But we were looking for a dog. We had a vacancy. I was new to the unit. So we went over there, we looked at the dog, and he was just, he was in a bad mood. He didn't want to have anybody near him. He was mean and everything. So we said, well, let's bring him into the kennels and give him a chance to settle down. So we put him in isolation for about a week and then introduced him to me. And then we put him through we put some courage tests. And the dog was just a phenomenal dog. I mean, he just took to me, I took to him, and he passed all the course, and here he is. And I tell you what, he was a one in a million dogs, and he was just exceptional. He passed all the health requirements. He's a mixed German Shepherd. He had part Husky and part Shepherd, which was the best of both breeds. What breed do you think is most common for police work? See, I'm glad you brought that up. Some say Dobermans, some say Pit Bulls, some say German Shepherds. The most dominant breed is German Shepherd. And why do you think German Shepherds are the breed that's most commonly used? Well,
don't everybody speak at the same
yes. They are actually bred for this type of work. They're bred for military and law enforcement work. That's what they're there for. They're known for their courage, their drive, their loyalty, and those are the qualities that we look for. Dobermans and Pit Bulls, what do you think the issue is with those dogs? What was that? Someone said too aggressive? It's the public image of those dogs, huh? People think they're too vicious, and that's one of the concerns when you do have a police dog program in your community, is that you don't want to have the image of being overly aggressive. German Shepherds are a beautiful animal, and that's part of the image that you want to have with the community, and they're also approachable. They're very approachable. What I like about our program and most police dog programs in the United States, the dog lives with the handler and their family, and that's where you get this strong bond between the dog and the handler. And I tell you, those dogs will do anything to protect their handler. The loyalty is so strong that they will give their life for their handler without even thinking. They just automatically will take a bullet, a knife, they'll do anything to save their handler. And the statistics will show it. I mean, they don't even think twice about putting themselves in harm's way. The use of police dogs has grown so much that the laws have to be adopted to protect them in the line of duty. And so in Texas, as with other states, there are laws that protect them. For instance, in Texas, police service animal, which means a dog, and also horses. They're used like in Dallas, they have a mounted patrol. So if anyone hurts a dog or a horse or any type of animal that's used in police work, especially trained for use by a handler or a rider, it's a felony of the 3rd degree if the person commits an offense under Section B, 6, or 7 by killing the animal or engaging in conduct that is likely to kill the animal, attempting to poison it or attempting to strike it, hurt it, shoot it, stab it. And we've had in El Paso, we've had a police dog stabbed. We've had the cartels, our drug dogs, they've actually tried to poison them once they know where they're kenneled at if they had gotten a big load. So it's very, very common. And also in 2012, this is in the United States, not just in Texas, but 18 police dogs had lost their lives in the line of duty. This would include heat exhaustion. They will continuously work and work, chasing a suspect, trailing or tracking a suspect. They get killed in car wrecks. They get killed, they get stabbed, they get shot. They'll do anything. They'll keep working for you. They're very, very loyal. Their training is very intense. This is a video that's actually from Europe, but this is the same type of training they get here in the United States. This training will show you their courage and the intensity that they demonstrate when they're pursuing a suspect. They get tunnel vision, but nothing will come between them and the suspect. And I'll just let you, this will speak for itself. This will show you what they'll go through to come after a suspect. Right over the top of the vehicle. No fear, no hesitation. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think I could go over that roof of that vehicle. And it's stunning. So sometimes suspects don't even realize what's happening. It happens so quick.
What's interesting here, it is a training film, training act, but at the same time, this dog doesn't realize that, and he jumps over the car and attacks a man shooting a weapon. Doesn't even think about it. If they told me go ahead and attack this guy with a gun, I'd have to think about it.
That's good.
In fact, I would probably not do it.
And then, I don't know if it's on this video or not, but they'll actually do it in teams, to have 2 dogs do it at the same time. And they won't, get distracted by 2 dogs working together. They'll actually work in tandem together. It's just amazing. This will show you again the same thing. The dog will not give up. Even though he's being struck, he's being hit by the suspect, and there's multiple officers around him, he's not being distracted, he's not attacking the officers, he's staying on top of that suspect until he is relieved by the officer.
On this Mesa, Arizona freeway, and it's all caught on tape. Police say the driver of his car was pulled over because he had expired tags. At first, he reportedly cooperated. But when the officer found 2 warrants out for his arrest, he fled the scene with a woman and baby in the car. During the
He just won't give up.
Robert Floyd Miles pulled over and let the female passenger out of the car, but he then took off again with the baby inside. Officers
Notice
followed
the dog
him
is
onto
in
the
there, right in
freeway,
there. He's not
through a
giving up.
traffic jam and ran into a guardrail.
Wagging his tail. He said, "This is fun, boss. I love this."
Eventually, he put the baby back in the car, but he grabbed a bag and what appeared to be a weapon. Police then moved in and took the suspect into custody. At first, the baby was found unresponsive, but breathing in the car. Police say the baby will be okay. Police believe
might have some sore teeth after that.
What relationship the woman in the car had to Miles.
So what did you see? Dog was right in the middle of it, did not give when this guy slung him around. Right? Sorry, Joe.
No, I mean, they lock on, and sometimes they almost in a frenzy, you just have to get them off.
You ready for this?
Yes. And this is the tough part.
Saying goodbye is never easy, even for Nan's best friend. The canine sidekick of a Kentucky police officer killed in the line of duty was by his partner's side until the very end. "33-year-old officer Jason Ellis was ambushed and shot to death as he was headed home from work. After playing his final call,
This is a double call. I'm speaking at 139 Adams. Officer Jason Ellis.
came the final goodbye from his family and friends. Then, just before Ellis was lowered to the ground, his canine partner Figo, with his head down, placed his paw on his casket, as if he was giving his last goodbye. Figo, now retired, would go on to be Ellis's widow Amy and their two 6- and 7-year-old sons' family dog. Goodness knows they could use a best friend during this painful time.
That bond is very, very strong. Like I said, those dogs are quartered at home. They become family members.
For a Terre Haute police dog shot in the line of duty.
Yeah, Canine, the Shadow is about to go home.
It was relief, the first glimpse of the injured police dog Shadow. At the Purdue Vet Clinic a few weeks ago, Shadow walked out to tears, cameras, officers embracing. Canine teams have a tight-knit bond, the officers often spending more time with the four-legged partners than their own families.
As a handler, we know that the sacrifice might have to be made, that our dog sacrifices for us or us for them. And hopefully the family, Officer Long family and the Terre Haute Police Department can show some, can get some strength from Canine Shadow.
It was a tender moment as Shadow walked past the casket holding the body of his partner, Terre Haute officer Brent Long. Dozens of canine teams from around the country filed past Officer Long, paying their respects too. On July 11th, Officer Long and partner Shadow were called in to serve a warrant. Shadow went into the house first, looking for the suspect hiding out. The dog was the first one to be shot in the jaw. His partner, Officer Long, was immediately met with gunfire. He too was shot in the face twice, but never survived. Shadow almost died.
Had we not adequately stabilized him, then potentially he could have died from this injury.
Canines live with the officers and their families. They protect together, play together, persevere together. It's why the officers saluted like soldiers.
We'll go home to Long's wife, a dispatcher who was on duty that day, and his two young children. Shortly after getting Shadow, Brent Long had a new tattoo of Shadow on his back. He said that way Shadow would always have his back. And Shadow had his back all the way to the very end.
It's amazing. The dog is, you know, they can sense when it's duty time and they can sense when it's family time. It's just amazing because when you put the assume a different personality, and then when you go home, be with your wife, they can be with your family, and they have a whole different personality. But the minute you put the uniform on, you can put them in the squad car, they have a total different personality. It's just amazing. It's like turning on a faucet, water, on and off. They are such an incredible partner. And what's really good about working with them, they'll never argue with you where you want to go eat. You can go eat anywhere you want. They'll never argue with you.
How many of you here have pets? How many of you realize that when you leave in the morning, you come back, they act like they've never seen you before? they just, hey, you're back. Where you been? All right. The next and final video we're going to see is recently here in September of this year. I'm from the Killeen area. I was raised in Killeen. I was a Killeen police officer. And in the entire history of the Killeen Police Department, we have never had an officer killed. In September of this year, we had our first officer killed. He was a SWAT officer. He was a 4-year veteran. He had a wife and 2 children. And he went to a building. They got a call that a man was inside of a building or his apartment with a weapon. And they went there. The SWAT team arrived. They went inside the apartment. The guy was up. He dove behind a chair, pulled out an AK-47 and fired and killed the officer that you're going to see here and wounded another one. And I'm going to let you see this, and we're not going to talk about it. We'll talk about it afterwards. tried to present to you this afternoon, or just for a very short time, is that we need to focus on things that are important. And police officers, while we hear so many bad things about them, there are so many good things that they do for the public and for individuals that you don't even know about. And so hopefully we've kind of brought that to the forefront so that you, next time you see a police officer, you know that they're out there to help. And even though we've had some bad experiences with them, they're not all bad. And in fact, the majority of them are good. Okay? Thank you.